What if everything that you've been taught about management is off the mark? I want to welcome you back to another mind-expanding episode of the Lead with Levity podcast. Today, we're exploring a perspective that challenges conventional leadership and structure, focusing on our theme of breaking tradition. It's one of our 12 superpowers that we've been focusing on this year. Our guest today is Jack Skeels. He's a two-time Inc. 500 award winner, CEO of agency Agile, where he's reshaping the approach to agility and efficiency in organizations. He's also a faculty member at the Rand Pardee School of Public Policy and an executive coach. So Jack has a unique vantage point that he's going to share with us today on how companies can achieve consistent excellence, which I am always interested in. Jack has a thought-provoking sort of idea that he's going to share with us as well. Maybe management isn't the solution we think it is. In this episode, we're going to dive into his theories and how they have the potential to potentially redefine organizational success.
It's time for a sneak peek. Sneak peek, sneak peek.
Manage less, but kill it on these 4 key moments. One of the key moments is called the why moment. It's the moment that explains the context around everything that we're doing. And we have an exercise that we teach around it. And it works very well, for example, when you're launching a new project with a bunch of stakeholders and team members and participants, and making sure that everyone really is included in the understanding of the project. It comes from a Japanese technique called B-A, and it means together, basically. I probably have mangled the exact translation, but it means to be all in one place together, and that sort of conceptually.
And now, on with the show.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lead with Levity podcast. To get resources mentioned in this episode and find out what we're all about, check us out at leadwithlevity.com.
Welcome back to the Lead with Levity podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Walker, and I have the pleasure of introducing our next guest, Jack Skeels. Jack is amazing. Jack is a 2-time Inc. 500 award winner, CEO of Better Company, which is an agile transformation and coaching firm. He's a faculty member at Rand Pardee School of Public Policy, an executive coach, and he helps companies really design their organizations for efficiency and consistent excellence. And what I'm very excited about, and what the reason why Jack is here today, is he recently published a book. Congratulations, Jack.
Thank you.
Yes. It's called Unmanaged, Master the Magic of Creating Empowered and Happy Organizations, which is what we are all here for. So Jack, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Heather. Thanks for having me on the show. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Me too. Can you tell us a little bit about why did you write this book?
This book actually goes back how I started my career, which I was a programmer back then. And I was actually a really sharp kid coming out of a great college program. And I realized that my managers didn't know anything about what I knew, right? And so it's sort of the opposite of what you think of as a manager. And I thought, what are all these managers for anyways? And inevitably I became a manager, which was somewhat horrifying to me to just realize I was one of them. But
that's called karma.
It is. Yeah, exactly. and I sort of decided I wasn't going to be one of them. And in other words, and the most common thing we know when we think of managers is really the sort of over managing of the person who's just trying to get the job done. And the book very much is about that. But I gained this mindset that just always said, do I really need to do that? And am I adding anything by acting like a manager kind of thing? And then fast forward, and actually I thought I'd become a pretty good manager with that mindset and the like. And fast forward about 25 years or so into the global economic downturn, I got laid off. I was running the Los Angeles office of a very large consulting company named Sapient. And they laid me off. And when one of the managers said, well, you were never that good of a manager anyways.
Oh.
And I thought, well, them's fighting words, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in the meantime, I'd worked at Rand Corporation as an analyst before I got to that job, and a senior analyst and researcher, basically. And I thought, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I had this name. I'd rather not repeat it on a broadcast, but it was a vengeance title for a book that I'm going to show you. I know how to manage the guy you laid off, right? And when I did the research, it was amazing what's out there in terms, and it's the most amazing thing about all the management research is nobody actually knows it. Okay. And I was stunned by that. And when I put it all together, this was 2010 to write the book, I realized I didn't know it either. In other words, I'd never lived it. I'd never actually managed well. And so I set out to do that. And that's where a company called Agency Agile, which is now a better company, was born, with that idea of how do we manage better? How do we essentially bring more out in our people and let them grow and excel and all that kind of thing? And so after we've done with 220 companies now, pretty successful at doing it. And it's time to write a book. And you're working on one as well. That was not a simple process, but it was also a learning journey as well.
Not.
Yeah.
So when you say nobody knows it, knows what? What are we talking about here?
Well, so there's been a lot of study done, and there's a whole management sciences part of the research world, right? There are PhDs and PhD students who do research on how organizations work, optimal organizational form, optimal managerial behavior, all that kind of thing. No, but you go get your MBA, you never read a single, and I have my MBA from a very nice school. You don't learn a single bit of that stuff. Okay. You don't.
So we're talking about the psychology of leadership, right?
Everything, because they can study mechanics a little bit easier than they can psychology. They can study, like, for example, a really interesting idea is that the more you manage, the less productive your organization is. So most managers don't realize that every time they take a managerial action, they may actually be making the organization less productive.
So break this down for me, Jack. You just opened up a whole can of worms. We're probably gonna just dive into what you just said. Break this down for me. When you're saying that every time you make a managerial action, you could be slowing things down, making things more inefficient. What does that look like? Because that sentence alone, that's like fighting words for
all the managers,
a whole
out
category of people. Yes,
Yeah.
all the managers out there are now going to rise up, and we're going to find you. So explain yourself, sir. What do you mean by this?
Yeah, well, let me give a really simple example. I think when we think of managing in the very simple form, maybe like a factory assembly line or something like that. And so we're making, and they always say widgets, right? Whatever widget is, right? But we're making, so I've got my department. I'm the manager of this part of the assembly line, and we make 200 widgets a week. Okay. And that's our job. And whatever, I have 8 people or something that I'm responsible for, and they're making widgets, and we keep on making 200 widgets a week. The department is very successful, right? But I, as a manager, feel like, well, what am I supposed to do as a manager? I'm just sitting here watching them make widgets, right? So I think I'm going to do something managerial. Why don't I call a meeting? In fact, I'm going to call a meeting every day. We're going to do a quick status meeting every day just to check in, and I'm going to give them updates on things. I'm going to feel good. I'll do a PowerPoint that I can show them, that kind of thing. And then they have to go back to making widgets. Well, a month goes by, and my boss calls me and says, hey, I just noticed you guys have been producing like 180 widgets or 185 widgets every week. And why is that? I implemented these meetings. Okay. So we're having these meetings every day just because I want them to be really informed and all that kind of thing. And my boss says, no meetings, just let them get work done, right? And my need to act managerial was a tax on their productivity. I was taking time out of their productive day, taking focus away from them, maybe even making them more confused. They walk out of my meeting and they're like, why in the hell were we in that meeting in the first place? And so this is a very simple illustration of something that's absolutely axiomatic in management research is the greater the intensity of managing in the organization, the lower the productivity of the organization. It's like proven kind of thing.
So can you give me another example of this? An example outside of widgets. So because yes, we have factory settings and all of that, but I would say that our listeners, for the most part, are also in office settings. They're managing remote teams. They may have team members who are more senior. They may have team members who are more junior who need more coaching and things like that. So I'm wondering, are you distinguishing between management and leadership, or just do we need managers at all?
Oh, watch out.
Are you
They're
still
going to be
asking
after
that
you.
question?
They're going to be after you as well. No, we do need managers. I think the part of the challenge, I'll give you the example in just a second too, but part of the challenge is that we have a mindset that managing is good and therefore more managing is better. That's just plain not true. Okay. That is not true. One of the ways it manifests in sort of the modern workplace, like you're bringing up, is that around 1970 or 1980, this idea of a matrix organization became au courant inside of organizations. And the idea that what this really does is it starts saying that, like, for any project I'm working on, I not only have my manager, but there are the other managers that are interacting with the project and other people called managers that aren't really managers, like project managers. And so all of a sudden I end up with this multi-manager environment. And the simple factory example, which I started with, is nice because I can tell that it's the manager's fault for why productivity is changing, because it's very simple.
They're pulling people from the line.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there's no accountability in a multi-manager environment, because if I'm a project manager managing poorly and interrupting people all the time, no one can tell that I'm actually destroying productivity. And so if we don't have any gate on measuring whether managing is a productive activity, and we have a bunch of people with the title managers, guess what? They're going to go act managerial. Okay. Because not acting managerial makes me look like I'm not a good manager. Right.
Okay. So I think I can get with you on the productive versus unproductive activities within the organization, and how you can't always, especially in modern organizations, you can't always see that direct line and that direct link between what one person is doing and the effect that they're having on the efficiency and the effectiveness of a group.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. You end up, I mean, the modern workplace really for the average knowledge worker is a multi-project environment. I'm working on 10 different projects this week, and any one of the managers involved in any of those projects can come by at any moment and drag me into a meeting, for example, or just interrupt me from getting stuff done, right? And
Yes.
this idea that existed way back when with a unity of management, in the simple factory example, there's only one manager. Therefore, that manager makes all the decisions, all the priorities. That's great. In the modern workplace, we don't have unity of management. We have many managers and they don't really agree on a lot of things, right? My project's more important. It's what you should be working on. Stop doing that, start doing that, those sorts of things. All those things are massive productivity killers. And there's no accountability for it either.
100% agree with you. So, okay, we're on the same page now, I think.
Cool.
What is the fix for this? Because this is a huge problem, Jack.
No, it's very, very, very large. So where I saw this first is at Sapient, the consultancy marketing agency. And these organizations, which we've worked with for a lot of years now, and are a typical 50-person organization, has 40 clients. It has 22 managers. And any given worker has 15 projects they're working on this week, which you think about that, how little time I get to spend on any project because I have to touch all of them, kind of thing. And so they represent the epitome of how crazy it can get, right? And so what we've been able to do is actually solve what we call the $1 million problem, which is they're losing more than $1 million, that 50-person organization, losing more than $1 million a year just to the inefficiency of all that. And so the fixes look like a couple things, and I'll go into a very practical fix, which is managers need to get aligned on what the priorities are. In other words, you need to have, and we teach how to do this, but you need a mechanism, for example, to revive that unity of management thing, right? In other words, like, how do we get all the managers to agree, okay, yeah, Angela's project is the most important project this week, and then after that comes Jonathan's or Ingrid's or whatever. that simple activity actually quiets down managing, right? Because now everyone knows until Angela's project is done, which by the way makes everyone more productive, right? Because now we're focusing on one thing. And so you need to restore some of the simplicity of management because we've gotten crazy about management.
Mm. Okay, so what does that actually look like? What is that practical tool that someone might be able to use to get their managers all together? Because you're right, when you have these competing priorities, depending on how close the relationships are, how much influence that
Oh,
person has,
absolutely. No, you're
if they're
getting
the
into
loudest person in the room.
you're getting to the evil side of it because actually those
Hmm.
managers engage in a several low grade, often more than low grade warfare over people's attention and focus, right? We had one client where one of those managers was going to the CEO and saying, can I say that my project is the most important? It's sort of like a kid going, talking to daddy to come back and tell
Yes.
the other kids, and just really toxic behaviors. That's one of those things is, frankly, if managers, it's one name for it is called a Kanban, Kanban. It's an agile concept. It's basically a list of the work being done, but you can structure this sort of list. It's a Japanese idea. You can structure this sort of list and make it public so everyone knows what the most important thing is. And that removes one of the big things you just mentioned, which is this, hey, I was the head of Sapiens office. All my projects got priority, but that's totally not fair. There's no reason, except if I walked over to someone, they're like, oh, Jack's the head of the office. I should go work on that now. And that was totally wrong. Okay. But we didn't have any other
Yeah.
mechanism. If I had not done that, then I drop out of the battle and my projects get no priority. Right. So it's
That's right.
it's an escalating battle that can get quite. And who pays in this battle? The worker, the person who's trying to get the work done. They've got
And
they.
the customer.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
not to mention, yeah, exactly, yeah.
So I've definitely been in environments like this, and I've had situations where there is that competition between you and other managers, other leaders, which makes it very, very hard to move forward. And something like the Kanban chart that you're referencing, how would you introduce that to a group? Let's say you've got a team of managers who are, some of them are in it for the right reasons. They've got a good heart, good intentions. Some of them are positioning themselves quietly behind the scenes. Then you've got leaders who are completely oblivious to all that positioning that's happening. How would you introduce this idea?
Yeah. So change is difficult. I'm sure you've covered that topic in your podcast. David Prokashka is one of the famous researchers on change. And I love his work because he basically says you just will fit. Change will, or inertia will win unless you attack the problem in the hearts and minds of people, not as a set of actions or rules, right? So one of the things we do in our trainings, and it's kind of the fun part, the book actually is sort of built this way. I call it cultural linguistic awareness. And that is, we need a vocabulary that actually brings to the surface the problem we're trying to solve. And my provocative statement, like managing is contrary to productivity, that's one of those ideas, is to get someone to think management is not necessarily greater good. It's like ketchup. It can make some dishes better at moments, but too much ketchup is too much ketchup and destroys the meal. And so we do a lot of sort of narratives, and the best way, by the way, to do it is one of our cool things. We'll do a workshop where we'll give everyone this sort of set of cultural concepts, culturally, the way the organization behaves. And like we just did here, where it's like, oh yeah, all those managers. And then we'll say, why don't you guys all tell your stories around this? And we'll have everyone tell their story around it. Okay. Now the managers are in the room as well. And the managers start jumping in and saying, yeah, I'm horrible at this, right? And so we get this sort of cultural awareness of that our behavior should change. And then flowing from that, of course, is and how do we do that? And that's the beautiful moment that you start saying, okay, the way you fix that is these 3 steps. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's build this list, this Kanban list, and see what that feels like for you guys to talk about all this stuff and make sure you agree on priorities. And people are blown away by it. It works so well. It gives clarity. It only succeeds, and it doesn't succeed all the time. It only succeeds. You were sort of getting at this. It only succeeds when you've got the cultural ethos inside of the organization that we do care about our workers' productivity and happiness and that kind of thing, which there are a lot of those organizations out there. There are some that say that but don't really do that. And then there's some literally we run into and they're like, no, we're doing fine. We push people and if we have turnover, that kind of thing. But it does have to kind of, from a leadership perspective, I think, change does need to come from the top as an imperative. We need to do this better, right? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. And when you're preparing yourself to go in and work with these organizations, some healthy, some not so healthy, everything in between, what helps you sort of build up the courage? What helps you prepare yourself? What have you found to be really helpful in becoming the best version of yourself? Because you've gone on a huge journey, right? From Jack, do we even need a manager? To, oh no, now I am the manager, to I'm helping leaders. I'm helping leaders with their organization. So what have you found to be helpful for yourself in that journey?
It's a great question. And in a way, looking inside myself, I think believing in my mission is the biggest thing, because you're right. It is. I do go into, me and my team will go into an organization where we know we may not succeed here. And that can be disheartening, right off the bat. And I think I just sort of say, if I don't bring my best self to this, then they can't bring their best self. And I show up, and this is something I learned from the leadership coaching training as well. If you don't believe in the best in people, and I call this the sort of humble gardener kind of thing, is that plants will grow if we water them and give them sunshine and that kind of thing. If you can't find that intrinsic love of humanity, then nothing's going to happen, right? Okay, then it's just about whether they're going to do what I say. And I think I see in my heart, and now I know after all these years, I always believed, but I know it deeply, is if we really bring people in and give them an opportunity to speak and talk about what's going on, things get better. We're good at that as humans. And I think that one of the things that fails inside the organization is people don't talk about it's just like relationships, by the way. People don't talk about the things they should be talking about. And look, I'm just really optimistic also. I don't know where that comes from, but it's in my DNA. So.
So when I believe that where you're at is where a lot of our listeners are at as well. They believe in the best in people. They understand that it's so important for them to show up at their best or as their best when they're going out there and trying to convince others that this is the way forward for us. And sometimes when you're on that path and you're moving upstream or you're doing this work, pressure can build. It can start to feel kind of heavy. And we talk a lot about using levity as a way to sort of relieve that pressure in your life so that you can continue to do this work in a joyful way. So what are some things that you do when you're having those days when you feel like, whoa, why did I even get into this to begin with? How do you make sure that you're not burning out yourself in the process?
So I'm an introvert. So my answer to almost everything is just like go in a dark room and let myself recover kind of thing. I think like many people that might be listening, I feel very driven because I'm passionate about what I'm doing. And I'm also racked by self-doubt all the time, right? Which is that, am I doing it right? Am I doing it well enough? Are we missing something? What else can I do? Did I do enough? Those sorts of things. And I think it was tough for me for a bunch of years when we were working with the 10th organization or the 15th organization. And it really took seeing, and actually we'd worked with about 100 organizations, and my business partner, one day we're walking back from dinner at a client, visiting a client. And I said, man, I hope people are just getting something out of this. I just hope that we're making a difference. And he just grabbed me, said, you've got to be kidding. And you have no idea how much impact we've had on people. And he starts just reading me the riot act. And I think that I draw on that at times, is that it isn't necessarily that I can experience it or feel confident in it, but that I've got people I trust that say we're making a difference. And I think underlying that is just, even if you can't make a difference, it's a different thing to try than to not try. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I bring an energy to it that this is all possible, and there are other people that maybe believe it's possible, and we become this tribe that pushes it that way. And sometimes the tribe wins that game, sometimes the tribe loses that game. But I think that sense of mission and destiny, I don't know why I'm good at renewing it. It's a really good question, but I am, and I've had those moments, and I just sort of go, what else am I going to do? Right?
Mm-hmm. Something to ponder over the weekend.
Yeah,
But
I'm sure I will be.
right when you go into that dark room by yourself.
Maybe
Well,
right after this recording. Yeah.
right? Like, oh, should I have said that? No, but what you said makes sense. So sometimes people think about levity as all jokes and humor and all of that, but really at the root of it, the Latin of it, it's all about sort of floating,
Yeah.
rising above pressure.
Yeah.
And when you're out there in the water and you've got this pressure that's kind of taking you under the water, once that's let go, once that's removed, you're bounced back up. And that's what happened when you had that conversation with one of your clients, and
Yeah.
they said, "No, let me tell you about all of the good things that you've done." And that removed a lot of that self-doubt, that removed some of that, am I even making an impact? And gave you more perspective, right?
Yeah. I actually, real quick story. I was at a conference speaking, and at the end of the day, and everyone's going their own way to go get dinner and the like. I walk out of the building, and I didn't really know it. I was there sort of to tell the story and see if someone wants to do business. And I'm 100 feet away, and someone's yelling behind me, Jack Skeels, please wait. And I turn around, and it's this woman. I don't remember her from any person or anything like that. And about 35 years old. And she comes over and she goes, I know you don't remember me. You trained our organization, whatever it was, 3 years ago in New York City. I said, oh, well, cool, great. She goes, you changed my life. You changed the way I think about work and working. I just wanted to grab you and say, thank you for that. And I was like, I still remember that to this day vividly, that
Wow.
even if it's just one person, right? And I know it's more than one person, but it's,
The ripple effect.
Yeah.
The ripple effect is huge. And that's something that you don't get to see it, honestly.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's an invisible ripple, but you are having that impact on the world. So I want to make sure we have a little bit of time to talk about this scenario. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. So we have a scenario for you. I've experienced this personally. I don't know about you, Jack.
We'll
but
find out.
We have poor Jorge who started his job, and he's just kind of feeling like he's been left. And he's wondering if he's got to just go it all on his own. He's feeling lonely. He's feeling isolated. People are too busy to check in with him, to introduce themselves. We know community is so important. So what were your thoughts when you heard this scenario?
Well, I think that's the standard onboarding program, isn't it?
Well, hopefully not anymore.
Yeah.
I think that is the traditional onboarding. Like, let's put you in front of a big tube TV. We're going to pop the VCR tape in there. Yeah. Some people are not even going to know what I'm talking about. And you're going to have to sit and watch like sexual harassment training and compliance. Yeah. That's onboarding.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. I think I'm going to tie this to the book a little bit as well, because I think if we talk about what managers should be doing that they're not doing today, I think it plays very well into that. In the book, we talk about the 4 key managerial moments, because one of the problems is if I say you're over managing, then you're like, well, how do I know what to manage less of, right? Mm-hmm. So what we really say is manage less, but kill it on these 4 key moments. One of the key moments is called the why moment. And it's the moment that explains the context around everything that we're doing. And we have an exercise that we teach around it. And it works very well, for example, when you're launching a new project with a bunch of stakeholders and team members and participants, and making sure that everyone really is included in the understanding of the project. It comes from a Japanese technique called B-A, and it means together, basically, I probably have mangled the exact translation, but it means to be all in one place together, and that sort of conceptually. And the activity actually looks like if we took Jorge's first day, and we believe in this as an organization, and I believe it as a manager, I might say, we're going to spend 2 hours with Jorge. Right at the beginning, I'm going to bring in the people who he most likely will deal with in his day, and all the people in my department. We're going to sit down, and I'm going to say a little bit about the department just to give some context and that kind of thing, and have Jorge say a little bit about himself. So we all sort of get grounded. I'm going to actually have everyone talk just a little bit about themselves. Okay. So I'm going to create a little community. Okay. And then I'm going to do something that changes it all. I'm going to say, Jorge, what is it that you are concerned about? What do you want to know? What do you want to understand about what we do and all that kind of thing? And we wait, because Jorge's not ready for that question, right?
No, Jorge's like, I just came to learn. I was expecting a video. No,
right. No, exactly. Yeah. Can I watch that sexual harassment tape again? And what I've done is I've signaled and I wait. Okay. I don't let Jorge off the hook because I know Jorge's capable of asking questions. And I want people who ask questions and think about their work and think about my department. And I'm patterning right away. That's not only okay, but it's essential that we think about what we're doing and why we're doing it and all that kind of thing. And Jorge, believe me, I've had some very uncomfortable moments. It feels like forever. 5 minutes feels like a half hour, right? But when everyone knows this is the drill, everyone will shut up and wait for Jorge to speak. And when those questions come out, then we're responsive to it. And we start building a patterning, and we all start getting a sense of how Jorge is wired, okay? How Jorge thinks, what Jorge needs, what experiences he needs to have to feel like he's more integrated with the work. And in doing so, we bring up these pro-social mechanisms in our brain that are all about how we build tribe and community and group understanding and that kind of thing. And in that hour or two, even if we spent 2 hours doing it, we make him feel like he's got a right to be here. He's valuable to us. We're giving our time to him, and that he has a right to go ask other questions. Because that's, by the way, that's the single biggest determinant of success in a career position is the velocity and depth with which you ask questions, right? That you asking for help, asking for knowledge, asking for support is
the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
It does. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. That's only one of the 4 key moments. So I'm not going to ask you to dive into all of the key moments, but we've got the why. What are the other 3?
Yeah. So basically the why is the broader context for why this is happening, why our department exists, or in the case of a project, why this project exists. The what. So it's why, what, go, and grow. And the what is what it is we're trying to do. And it turns out a similarly clever activity is available for how do we make sure everyone understands what we're trying to do? And the funny thing that comes out when you do that is if you have a multi-manager environment, usually the managers don't even know or agree on what we're trying to do. But you've seen that before, I'm sure, right? And so that does a clarification there. And then go is when people go do the project. And this is that idea, can we just leave them alone and let them do the work? And that's a lot of the unmanaging. And then grow is in fact an emphasis on this idea that we need to have methods for how do we make sure everyone gets a chance to play? And I know we don't want to dive into DEI and inclusion pool right here, but I do want to point out that if it's left to managers, this is a big piece of managerial inefficiency. If it's left to managers to choose who gets to play, the bias is ridiculously significant. The job evaluations, assessments of who's capable of doing it are wildly off and skewed by these notions of people that I feel more relatable to are the people that are better at it. And that's totally
Right, exactly. And Jack, we can dive into
well,
it.
I didn't
That's
know.
okay.
Yeah, sure.
We can dive into it. It's okay. I'm just curious about this grow, because choosing who gets to play after you already set them off to go do, it seems off. Like I was
Oh, right.
expecting grow to be, all right, how can we ensure that we have mechanisms in place to learn from what we're doing and test and iterate? And so you threw me off there.
Yeah. So the diagram in the book has why, what, go as a top thing, and grow is underneath it. And so it's not a complete chain of sequence. There is grow stuff that you do at the end of the project, right? Which a lot of people call it the retrospective, or frighteningly the
postmortems
after death, right? Yeah, exactly. It'd be nice to have the post-life, or whatever that would be in Latin. The bigger thing around grow is that people throughout that project had the opportunity to grow. And that's through the choices we made about including them early on so they understood, but also giving them challenges and giving them opportunities. I think the big challenge inside of our workplaces around DEI, we work with the 4As, American Association of Advertising Agencies. And they have a program called MAPE, which is a multicultural intern program. And one of the big things, if you want to work in the agency space, is you need to get an internship. And so they're doing a lot of work to actually drive a more inclusive, diverse, if you will, workforce that gives people a chance to even be chosen, right? That kind of thing.
Right.
It works apparently works really, really well, according to the research they've done on it. But the other thing is once that worker gets inside the environment, how do we make sure that they're getting a fair shot at succeeding? Okay? And that comes down to this terrifying idea that managerial choice works, and it doesn't. It's horrible. Deloitte, I have it in the book. I talk about it in the book. The research is very clear. Managers choose poorly. Okay? And they choose with a very, very large, this is no surprise, right?
Yeah, there's so many biases at play.
Yeah. And so when you think about growing people, you need to think about not using managerial choice as a key criteria, right? Which is sort of counterintuitive. There are other solutions to it, okay? I can use a take turns approach. It's Angela's turn to do this, right? Not who do I think is best, but it's
sort of a round robin.
Yeah. And so then the question is, if Angela's going to do it, maybe she doesn't have a lot of experience doing it. So then what do we need to do to make Angela successful at doing it? Right. Rather than say, well, we'll wait until Angela fails, right? That kind of thing. I tell a story in there where the person that got chose to do one of the hardest parts of a project because no one else was available was a guy who a year before had won a yo-yo championship and had never done any programming at all. And everyone just laughed when I suggested maybe he could go do it. And I said, okay, let's assume that he can. What would he need for support? And everyone jumped in. Again, that sort of use of a question. And he killed it. He killed it. He did a great job and everyone was blown away. But if you had asked anyone, was Eric the guy to do it? No, he wasn't. Yeah.
That does solve for a very common issue that I see where in leadership levels, whenever there's an opportunity for a new project, they're always picking high performers, people who have a lot of ability to get things done. And those same people get tapped again and again and again for project after project after project until they're burnt out and they can't do anymore. And what's unfortunate about that is there's so many other people within the organization who could get that job done. It's just that leader who's making those choices doesn't have the visibility into the capabilities within their organization or interest levels or any of that availability. So they continue to reach out to the same people that they know, like, and trust. And yeah, that's a huge issue.
And it's a very flawed management behavior. There's another effect I talk about, which is called the pecking order effect, which comes from studying chickens, right? And what it is the chicken that pecks the fastest gets more food, which means that chicken gets stronger, which means the chicken pecks faster and is stronger and can push other chickens away. And that's the thing that happens as well, is the reason we have the high potential people, the hypos as they're called a lot of times, right? Is because we actually believe they're hypos. And so they get the best projects, they get the best challenges, they get to learn more and faster. I'm always shocked when a manager, by the way, complains about their people, like half my people, we should be replacing them or something like that. And I think, no, the person you should replace is the manager, yourself, because it's your job to not have that situation. It's your job to create a department filled with high potential people, not to say, look at the one person I created on the backs of everyone else, right? And
Right. And, I heard this, one of my clients actually mentioned this to me, and I want to share this because I think it's important for everyone to know. Everyone has potential.
Totally.
The question is, for what? And once we turn it a little bit like that and start to look at that and ask that question, for what potential? I know you have it. I just have to figure out, how can we unlock that and apply that to different things? That opens up so many possibilities.
Yeah. And I know he's probably not people's favorite author these days because of other things, but Steven Pinker had a book, and I think it's The Blank Slate. I forget which one, but he cited some research that showed basically anyone can learn anything. Okay. It's just a matter of how long it takes. And so I agree with what you're saying, and you may not have enough time for that person to learn that thing, but a lot of times, like Eric, the yo-yo champion, right? It's a matter of, what do they need? Let's just assume they can get there, right? And let's make the investment. And it may not be as fast as you wish, but in the end, you'll succeed because they want to succeed as well. And I think we don't realize just how powerful all of us humans are. All of us humans came from proto-humans that survived the brutality of the world 400,000 years ago. Okay. All your ancestors are saying, it's her turn right now. Okay. She's ready. She's been preparing for this for 400,000 years. We got her ready by learning how to do things and building it into our gene pool and everything. I think that the potential inside of organizations is probably 50% squandered, at least, in terms of what people could be doing.
Yeah, you're probably right about that, if we could sit down and actually measure it.
Yeah.
So, Jack, this has been a really interesting, thought-provoking conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
A real pleasure.
And then if anyone's interested in learning more about you, what you're about, where should they go?
I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, as are most business folks these days. Please just reach out to me. Happy to talk. And also, of course, Better Company. It's bettercompany.co, but you'll find it if you search on Better Company. And we would love to work with you and your organization if that's something that's interesting to you as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jack. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. It's been a real pleasure. Great conversation.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lead with Levity podcast. To get resources mentioned in this episode and find out what we're all about, check us out at leadwithlevity.com.